The Romans built roads. The British built ships. He clicked the screen off. Darkness behind him. Spotlight on him. So the question is, what will Saudi Arabia build? He stepped forward. Center stage now, the entire room hanging on his words. I say, build bridges. Not just physical ones, human bridges. Economic bridges. Bridges between the world's youngest continent and its most ambitious kingdom. The room was silent, but it was the kind of silence you feel in your chest. The kind that tells you everyone is locked in, processing, thinking, ready. This wasn't a courtesy pitch from a small, landlocked nation anymore. This was a moment. This wasn't just some theoretical pitch. It was a bold policy move, packed with real-world consequences. But then, just when the room thought they had Ibrahim Traoré figured out, he did something no one expected. He calmly closed his tablet, stepped back from the microphone, and looked out at the crowd. No slides, no stats, no tech, just him and his voice. But here's the truth, he said, his voice steady and unmistakably clear in the suddenly silent hall. I didn't come here to ask for your investment. Heads turned. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience like a breeze. Even Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sat up, his focus sharpening. I came here, Traoré continued, to offer you something far more valuable than a business deal. A pause. The room leaned in. I'm offering you a place in history, not as a kingdom that got rich from oil, but as a kingdom that helped others become rich from their own resources. Not a country that bought influence, but one that earned it, through partnership, through respect. The air was thick now, not with formality, but with meaning. You could feel the shift. The Trans-Sahel corridor will be built, he said simply, whether Saudi Arabia joins us or not. And just like that, the entire energy of the room changed. We already have commitments from regional neighbors, interest from Chinese developers, early conversations with European banks, and US companies doing their due diligence. We're not here asking for a bailout. We're inviting you to build with us, not for us. It was a bold statement, maybe even unheard of in that setting. A leader from one of the world's poorest countries telling one of the richest, most powerful, that their support was welcome, but not required. But, Traoré added, if Saudi Arabia chooses to join this mission, you won't just be funding railways or fiber lines. You'll be investing in something much bigger, the future of South-South cooperation. You'll be proving that real power doesn't come from holding wealth. It comes from multiplying it. He stepped down from the stage and walked slowly toward the Crown Prince's table. But this time, it didn't feel like a pitch anymore. It felt like a moment of shared vision, like two leaders having a conversation as equals. Your Highness, he said, you've spoken powerfully about Vision 2030, about transforming Saudi Arabia into a global hub. He paused, then raised his voice just enough for the room to hear. But what about Vision 2050? Imagine Saudi Arabia, not just transformed, but transformative. The kingdom that helped lift a continent. The kingdom that helped rewrite the global map. No applause yet, just silence. The kind of silence that says, everyone was listening. Picture this, Saudi companies not just doing business in Africa, but growing with Africa. Imagine Saudi students attending universities built with Saudi investments right on African soil. Now flip the script. African students working side by side in Saudi labs, fueled by minerals dug up back home. This wasn't just another run-of-the-mill development pitch. Traoré was painting a bold, expansive vision, something completely different from the usual north-to-south aid dynamic where one side gives and the other takes. That's why I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, he said plainly, because I'm not here to ask for money. He didn't bring a squad of consultants with fancy spreadsheets and financial forecasts either. No, he came alone, one leader speaking straight to another, offering a partnership of equals. He stepped forward, right up to the Crown Prince, close enough for a private chat, but loud enough so the whole room could hear. "Your Highness," he said, "Saudi Arabia's greatest achievement won't be the tallest skyscraper, or the fastest train, or the smartest AI. Your greatest achievement will be proving that real power isn't about dominating markets, it's about creating markets. It's not about controlling resources, but developing them. Not about buying loyalty, but earning respect." The room fell completely silent. At that moment, everyone knew. They were either witnessing a game-changing moment in diplomacy or watching someone risk it all and fail spectacularly. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every single delegate felt it. This could either kickstart a revolutionary partnership or blow up in everyone's face. Then, finally, the Crown Prince spoke. His voice was calm, but crystal clear, echoing through the still room. "President Traoré," he said, "over the last 5 years, I've heard thousands of investment pitches, countless proposals and offers, mostly about what Saudi Arabia can give: our capital, our markets, our strategic location, our influence." He paused, eyes locked on Traoré's. "You," he continued, standing tall now, commanding the entire room's attention, "are the first person to focus on what Saudi Arabia can become." And with that, the room shifted. This was no longer just a presentation. It was a moment nobody there would forget. Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed isn't just another speech. It's the kind of forward thinking that will shape global development for decades to come. President Traoré didn't come here asking us to fix Africa's problems. He came inviting us to be part of Africa's solutions. The Crown Prince rose and began pacing slowly around his table, drawing closer to where Traoré stood. "This," he said, "this is exactly the kind of partnership Vision 2030 was built to create. Relationships founded on mutual benefit, shared growth, and real respect for what each partner brings to the table." Stopping just in front of Traoré, close enough that their words felt like a private conversation, even though everyone in the room leaned in, trying to catch every syllable, the Crown Prince said, "Mr. President, your Trans-Sahel infrastructure corridor is the kind of transformational investment Saudi Arabia wants to back, not because we see Africa as a charity case, but because we see Africa as a true partner in shaping the future global economy." Then, turning to address the entire assembly, he made an announcement that shook the room. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund will commit $500 million to kick off the first phase of the Trans-Sahel infrastructure corridor. And there will be more funding, contingent on project milestones and the participation of our partner nations. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, heads turning. This wasn't just a big financial deal. It was a bold, clear signal. Saudi Arabia was changing how it approached Africa, from viewing it as a recipient of aid to seeing it as a strategic equal. But the Crown Prince wasn't done. "Moreover," he continued, "Saudi Arabia will establish a permanent African partnership office right here in Riyadh, focused exclusively on nurturing South-South cooperation and opportunities." Then, in a moment no one expected, he extended an invitation. "President Traoré, I would be honored if you would chair the advisory board for this new initiative." The offer was historic. Typically, African leaders were guests in Saudi Arabia for ceremonies or formalities. Rarely were they asked to help shape Saudi policy itself. Traoré nodded quietly, but his eyes said it all. The weight of this moment was enormous. This was about so much more than money or infrastructure. It was about dignity, respect, and proving that real partnership could be far stronger than patronage. "Your Highness," Traoré replied, "this partnership will be remembered as the moment when the global South stopped competing and started cooperating, when wealth became a tool to create more wealth, not just to hold on to it." The Crown Prince smiled, genuine warm, the first time all day. "Mr. President," he said, "I believe you're absolutely right. and I believe this partnership will bring benefits to both our nations beyond anything we can imagine today. The formal session wrapped up with polite applause, but the real buzz was happening in the private conversations that followed. Delegates from other African nations quickly swarmed Traoré, eager to figure out how their own countries could plug into this new partnership. Over in the corners, European and American reps quietly started crunching numbers, wondering how this Saudi-African alliance might reshape their own ties on the continent. But the most important moment happened away from the cameras and microphones. As the crowd began filing out of the conference hall, Crown Prince bin Salman approached Traoré for a private word. "Mr. President," he said quietly, "your presentation today wasn't just impressive. It was necessary. For a long time, Saudi Arabia has been searching for real, authentic partnerships, not just transactional deals. You've shown us what that actually looks like." Traoré nodded, grateful. "Your Highness," he replied, "Burkina Faso has learned that dignity means more than charity, and partnership is far stronger than patronage. Today proved these aren't just words. They actually work." The Crown Prince reached out, and their handshake wasn't just protocol. It felt like the start of a genuine alliance. "Mr. President," he said, "I believe this is the beginning of something transformational for both our regions." News of the partnership spread fast, far beyond the walls of the conference center. African stock markets surged as investors recognized the massive potential behind Saudi-backed infrastructure projects. On social media, young Africans shared clips of Traoré's speech with captions like, "This is what real leadership looks like," and finally, someone speaking as an equal. The international press was all over it, but the coverage was split. Western outlets focused on the geopolitical ripple effects. How might this new Saudi-African alliance challenge European and American influence in Africa? Meanwhile, Chinese media zeroed in on the competition angle, pointing out how this could complicate China's Belt and Road Initiative on the continent. Middle Eastern news hailed the partnership as a clear sign of Saudi Arabia stepping up as a global leader. Yet, the most powerful reaction came from African leaders themselves. Within just 48 hours of the announcement in Riyadh, presidents and prime ministers from across Africa were reaching out to Saudi Arabia, to Burkina Faso, eager to get involved. The president of Senegal called first, ready to discuss how Dakar could connect to the Trans-Sahel corridor. The momentum was undeniable. This wasn't just a deal, it was the start of a new chapter. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia reached out, eager to explore how the Trans-Sahel corridor could link up with existing infrastructure built by Chinese partners. Even South Africa's leaders, representing the continent's most advanced economy, started looking into ways they could pitch in on this ambitious project. What made all of this truly striking wasn't just the scale, it was the sincerity behind it. These weren't just polite diplomatic gestures or routine words of support. These were serious questions and real commitments from leaders who sensed a fundamental shift in how African countries could now engage with the world on their own terms. Back in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, the energy was electric. People crowded around radios and TVs, glued to the news of their president's breakthrough on the global stage. For a nation long used to being overlooked or talked down to by international powers, seeing their leader treated as an equal by one of the world's most powerful kingdoms was nothing short of historic. But Traoré himself wasn't caught up in the celebration. His focus was clear: deliver results, not just headlines. In interviews after returning from Riyadh, he kept repeating the same message. A handshake in Saudi Arabia means nothing if we don't get real things done back home. Partnership isn't about promises. It's about performance. That practical, no-nonsense attitude set the tone for everything that followed. Instead of grand ceremonies or over-ambitious deadlines, Traoré's government rolled up its sleeves and got to work turning diplomatic wins into tangible progress. The very first move? Setting up the Trans-Sahel Coordination Office right in Ouagadougou, a joint effort with officials from Burkina Faso and technical experts from Saudi Arabia. Their mission was straightforward but bold: turn the infrastructure corridor from a vision on paper into reality within 5 years. And Saudi Arabia's commitment wasn't just talk. Within 3 months of that Riyadh meeting, Saudi engineers were out in the Sahel running feasibility studies. Saudi construction firms started bidding on early contracts. Saudi banks began building financial links with African institutions. But what really set this partnership apart was its emphasis on equality and mutual benefit. This wasn't just Saudi money flowing into African projects. It was a genuine collaboration, knowledge and skills being shared side by side. African engineers worked shoulder to shoulder with their Saudi counterparts. African economists helped shape project plans. African companies were given priority when it came to construction contracts. This approach wasn't just changing the corridor, it was setting a powerful new example for how development partnerships could and should work. For decades, African development had often been defined by dependence on former colonial powers, Cold War giants, or emerging players like China. But this Saudi partnership, it was something completely new, a true collaboration between developing nations built on shared strengths, not old-school hierarchies or one-sided aid. And the ripple effects went way beyond money and infrastructure. Young Africans started to see the world differently. International relations weren't just something happening to them. They could be active players, shaping their own futures. Universities across the continent launched fresh programs focused on South-South cooperation and new diplomatic strategies. African think tanks began digging into alternative ways for nations to partner up, research that challenged old models. 6 months after that pivotal meeting in Riyadh, the first stretch of the Trans-Sahel corridor officially broke ground. The ceremony was intentionally low-key, but packed with meaning. Instead of inviting a parade of international VIPs for a flashy event, the celebration honored the people who mattered most: local community leaders, regional engineers, and the workers who'd be building the road. In his speech, Traoré nailed the moment. Today, we're not just breaking ground for a road. We're breaking ground for a new way of nations working together. We're proving that partnership beats patronage, dignity outshines charity, and that the Global South can write its own story of growth and prosperity. Construction moved ahead smoothly. Saudi technical expertise teamed up with African labor and resources to deliver results that actually outperformed expectations. Even better, the project created real jobs for local communities and built lasting technical skills that would serve the region long after the roads were finished. By the time the partnership's first year wrapped up, one thing was clear: this was no flash in the pan. It was a success story that couldn't be ignored. The Trans-Sahel corridor wasn't just on track, it was ahead of schedule and coming in under budget. Trade between Africa and Saudi Arabia had jumped by 60%, a clear sign that this partnership was more than just talk. But maybe even more impressive was how this model was sparking similar collaborations across the Global South. Brazil was now eyeing infrastructure deals with Nigeria. India was stepping up its involvement in East Africa's booming tech scene. Mexico was building new trade ties with manufacturing hubs in North Africa. The Saudi-African partnership wasn't just a one-off. It was the seed of a growing network of South-South alliances reshaping the global economy. But here's the thing: the real success wasn't just in the numbers or trade growth. It was in a fundamental shift in how countries approached working together on the world stage. Gone was the old idea of rich countries simply handing out aid to poorer ones. In its place was a fresh model, developing nations joining forces as equals, leveraging their unique strengths with respect and mutual benefit. Crown Prince bin Salman captured this shift perfectly during a speech marking the one-year anniversary of the Riyadh meeting. President Traoré showed us that real leadership isn't about having all the answers, he said. It's about asking the right questions. He didn't come here to ask us to fix Africa's problems. He invited us to be part of Africa's solutions. That invitation didn't just change how Saudi Arabia worked with Africa, it redefined what partnership truly means. Meanwhile, Traoré stayed humble, always focused on what really mattered: results, not recognition. When asked about the success, he emphasized that it was a collective win. This partnership thrived because it was built on truth, not empty praise. It was about mutual benefit, not one-sided charity. It was grounded in respect, not pity, he said. And those values? They can work anywhere, between any nations, if leaders have the courage to embrace them. What started as a bold pitch in Riyadh had grown into something far bigger than just a diplomatic success story. It was a new blueprint for global cooperation. This wasn't just a partnership, it had become a blueprint for how international relations could work in the 21st century. It proved that dignity and true partnership aren't just nice ideals. They're smart, practical strategies that deliver better results than the old models of aid and dependency. As the first phase of the Trans-Sahel corridor neared completion, its impact was already clear. New businesses were popping up along the route. Schools and educational programs were expanding in connected communities. But most importantly, young Africans were starting to see their continent in a new light, not as a place waiting to be saved, but as a place actively shaping its own future. What began as one man's refusal to ask for charity and instead demand a real partnership had grown into a movement inspiring similar collaborations all across the global south. It was rewriting the playbook for how nations could work together in an increasingly connected world. And back in Gurango, that small village where it all started, 10-year-old Musa was now studying by electric light, dreaming big about becoming an engineer. He was growing up in a world where African leadership was no longer on the sidelines, but driving international change. The boy in that photograph had become a symbol, proof of what's possible when partnership replaces patronage, dignity outweighs charity, and leaders have the courage to demand respect instead of just hoping for sympathy. The transformation was complete, but the real impact, it was only just getting started.